Right.
They would have to go over to their staff person and say, well, what about this question? And we get our talking points from the National Restaurant Association, who just scours through that law and says, okay, if we can modify this and modify that, it may help in the long run. But when we would present these points to the congressman,
it was bewildering.
It was bewildering.
Yeah.
It was over their heads. They don't get it either.
Yeah. We're going to come back and talk about this. If you want to tell us, did Romney acknowledge it? Did he get it right? Or is he, as one of my emailers says, Mitt for brains? Not my word. 599-5555 to hang with the gang right now. We're back with Gang of Four. It's 10:23. Here's Karen in the newsroom.
So the Restaurant Association
Can't said repeatedly.
Get him, Tiger.
KTSA News Time, 10:28. Jack Riccardi, Gang of Four, on for a Friday. You can jump right in the middle of it at 599-5555. We have Elaine, Wolff, editor of Plaza, the Armas TX.com, the online newspaper for San Antonio, doing all their in-depth coverage of the city elections, which wrap up tomorrow. We have one of the best-known names in the restaurant business and in business, period, in San Antonio, Louis Barrios. And he has a couple of extra opinions in his back pocket as well. And Steve Hilbig, who's a judge in the Texas State 4th Court of Appeals. And he's in the right place because we're all very judgmental here on Gang of Four.
But it takes me 30 days to form an opinion.
I don't know if you had a chance to hear, we had a gentleman on the show last hour named Eric Greitens, who's a former Navy SEAL, and he's involved in some very interesting work now as a civilian. But he was talking about the SEAL mission to take down bin Laden. And one of the interesting things I heard about it this week, this was reported of all places by the BBC, is that special security measures are now being taken around these SEAL team members and their families. It really is, it's almost unthinkable that somehow their identity might be known or could become known to our enemies. And yet, Elaine, what if anything remains secret these days, right? I mean, there's no such thing as a secret anymore.
I only just started seeing this story surface today, so is it a sense of like we don't trust that our government even can keep that information secret? Or
well, I even started thinking, you know, if you're putting extra protection around the Smith house, aren't you
Then
almost
suddenly
signaling that the Smith house is where one of these people, I mean, it's crazy. You have to really be careful with this. But yeah, I guess we are in fact saying we don't trust our own ability to keep our lips zipped about this.
Right, exactly.
And yet the photos are still, no one's seen the photos, you know?
Well, how did that? Here's my. How did that story get started? How did the SEALs first begin to worry that they might be in danger?
I'm not sure if they did worry. He says he never worried when he would do all
Yeah.
kind of missions. He never worried about it.
But I mean, sort of this time around, did something come out of the administration? Did some news station somewhere do a story, and all of a sudden everybody's like, I guess what I'm saying, did it come from any legitimate place? This concern,
the
or
official
did it come
government
from-
line has never mentioned
Yeah.
the SEALs. Only Joe Biden has mentioned the SEALs, not surprisingly. But the official line is that it was a mission, and it was carried out by an unnamed unit. The assumption everybody makes, and no one has corrected this assumption, is that it was that Team 6. But there's never been an official acknowledgement of that. So I don't know where the leak, from where the leak would come. And I guess I wonder if this might even be one of those examples of overestimating the enemy, because it seems to me we've done a fair amount of that over the years, where we've started to almost mythify them as having, the power to see through walls, and they have technology we can't even dream of. And, look at the way this guy was living. You look at the pictures, I'm just not impressed,
We also live in the age of cinematic imagination. I mean, there's that great movie Munich where the Israeli Secret Service goes out and systematically tracks down folks, many, many years after the fact, and assassinates them in dramatic fashion. So I think also, our imagination kind of runs away with us. But then again, I just go back to, so where did this idea come from originally? Just somehow this would suddenly happen, and I feel like maybe the media is partly responsible for creating a story where there isn't really a story.
What about this just will not go away. We have more and more members of Congress who have seen the photos. One of them, Jim Inhofe, the senator from Oklahoma, graphically described them on Fox News Channel, so much so that now you almost don't have to see them. But it seems like many of these members of Congress in both parties are saying, you know, they are grotesque and graphic, but we think they should be shown. I mean, this argument is not going away, is it? I guess it has in this room. Okay.
I don't think it's the burning issue people are worried about right now.
Well, no,
I
of course
don't.
not. But in a way, by not showing it, it keeps the question alive. Whereas if you just released one or two photos, that would be the end of that discussion.
But what question is kept alive? The question of whether or not they should release. I mean, I guess I'm trying to
I'm
understand.
just more
the question
curious
being
about
alive.
I'm more curious about what their thinking is. I'm fascinated to know. Is it
how they
is
can
it inflaming?
politicize? How can they politicize and get the maximum political gain?
Is it
from
inflaming
this
the
death?
Arab Street? Is it that they're graphic? Is it that
political,
it's
if you ask
spiking
me.
the football?
On which side do you think is
Like political
I think,
how?
You know, President Obama is such a bright man and a deep thinker, and I want to give him credit saying that he's really thought this through, and it won't be good for America's diplomacy efforts. But then the cynical side says he politicizes everything, and so he's going to figure out a way where he can get some more political mileage out of it.
like the way he politicized his own birth certificate. I mean, I don't think, to me, an issue's being made out of this, right? And I don't know how legitimate an issue is. It is fair to worry about the power of an image. I mean, think about, and I'm not in any way comparing these two historical individuals, but you think about the image of Che Guevara, right? Dead like a trophy, and I don't think that is, and that wasn't even during a digital time when you can immediately have a million copies out there used in a million different ways and altered in a million different ways and made into all sorts of different symbols and messages. So I don't, on the one hand, I always err on the side of openness. Of course we should see these things, but do we need to see everything? What is it that needs to be seen here? Do we want to treat it like a trophy? And there is sort of a trophy aspect to a photo like that.
See, I'm always surprised to hear somebody like you make that argument, Elaine, because I want you to be the person that makes that judgment. You're an editor.
Yeah.
You're a journalist. I want you to be the gatekeeper for your audience, for your intended audience. I'm not comfortable
But the
with the
only way-
President
the only
of the
way I
United
can-
States
yeah.
being the gatekeeper of information and deciding what we need to know and don't need to know.
See, I feel like once I have an image like that, the only question I can really ask as a gatekeeper is it true? Is it a fact? And at that point, it's not up to me to decide whether you ought to see it, right?
Oh,
That's
but you
not my
make
job as a
decisions
media
about what to
gatekeeper.
put and what not to put on your website or in a newspaper.
But then you're basically doing a sort of hierarchy thing, like how important is this piece
Right.
of news? I don't think you could argue that something like that was not incredibly important, right? So you're just saying, I only have X amount of room today, I only have X amount of reporters, so which things do we cover? And we have to cover the things that seem like they have the most impact on people's lives.
But
So
you do make
you couldn't
judgments
that-
about you do make judgments about not identifying the victim of a crime or the person alleging a rape. I mean, it's not that you don't have room for those
But is
things. You
this-
make a judgment, and the public is well served by you making that judgment rather than somebody who is not answerable to them making that judgment.
Yeah, but this doesn't fall into that type of category. We know who the victim is. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, so if I had that document, I'd feel like, well, okay, yeah, I have to release that document. I mean,
If you had the
But
photo,
if I
you
had
would
the photo-
you would feel compelled to use the photo.
if we were the sort of the source, like if the
I know you don't
photos-
run that kind of
yeah.
a site, but let's say you
Right.
did. Let's say
If
you were
the pho-
running
if the photo was already-
mysa.com.
right. If the photo was already out there and other sites were using it, I wouldn't feel like, oh, it's my responsibility. Like maybe I have a responsibility to release that. But if we happen to somehow come into possession of it, and we were the only site in possession of it, I don't know that I would feel like, oh, it's up to us to say the public doesn't need to see this.
But don't you think it's
So-
better to have multiple gatekeepers in the marketplace who are deciding yay, nay, maybe, put it 2 clicks away, as opposed to one person in government saying, in his or her own judgment, the American people, quote unquote,
Yeah.
don't need to know this.
Well, the way most of this, so there's a lot of things that the government has that we don't get to see, right? I mean, you can put in a FOIA request for stuff and the government gets to withhold some
Right.
things. There's supposedly a presumption, right, that all the information that our government holds belongs to us and we get to see it, but there's
Well, I
so
don't think
many
anybody
exceptions.
presumes we get to see it.
No, but that legally, we presume that it is ours to see with exceptions, right? And so this ought to go through that kind of process ultimately, I think, in the same way that,
Okay, I would
that
agree with
documents go
that.
through that process. And in which case you have many gatekeepers. But I don't, how long have we had it? Have we had a chance to even have that process? So this notion that they need to release it right away, we elect officials and those officials hire staff because they have to make difficult decisions like that. And we, to some extent, trust them to make difficult decisions like that.
Yeah. I don't think we really have any choice. And by the way, I don't think it would make much of a difference who was president. I suspect this would be the decision of anybody, because this has been the attitude of people in government for a long time. They infantilize the American people. They don't tell them everything. I actually believe there are probably going to be times in the future when we will face a real threat that they will feel we cannot handle knowing about, and they will choose to try to deal with it secretly rather than be open about it. And then someday we'll have that whole "was the cover-up worse than the crime" discussion. I mean, they don't trust us. It's not that we don't trust them, it's that they don't trust us. And so to say this would be inflammatory, people don't need to see this, that implies to me that we're somehow not, we're less than them. They can handle seeing
They
it.
didn't call you
but
before they went
cannot-
on. They didn't call you before they went into a Abbottabad, right? To say.
Well, no. Well, I don't understand what that has to do
Well, I
with
guess so. At which point, which decisions are you okay with them making without checking with you first, or without telling you ahead
Well,
of
you
time? Which
obviously
decisions-
can't carry out a mission like that without it being secret ahead of time.
Yeah.
But as you're saying, we know he's dead. We accept
Mm-hmm.
that he's dead. They have the DNA evidence. They're not proving to us that he's dead by releasing
Mm-hmm.
the photos, but by not releasing them, what they're saying to us is, we're one class of people. We can look at these things.
Mm-hmm.
You're another class of people. You can't see these things.
Right. Well, my point is the government makes those decisions all the time. And if you're going to have a government that has a military that carries out operations, you're saying that it's okay for them to make that decision about some things. Not having seen these photos, I don't know. I personally think they should probably release the photos, but I don't mind them going through a process of decision making about that because they have to do that with all sorts of stuff that is related to military action.
Were you okay
So,
with the
diplomatic
veil of secrecy around the motivations for invading Iraq? Aren't you one of the people who would say we were lied to get into that war? I think
We
you
absolutely
are.
were lied to, but that's a
Okay.
different. And now
Well,
you're
but I
conflating
mean,
issues here, right?
couldn't
You're
you
saying-
argue that
Yeah.
if the government can't reveal ahead of time its intentions or its motivations for a military mission, I guess you're saying therefore the government can't
Well, now you're
reveal the
conflating
outcome
things
of a
that
military
need to be
mission?
done covertly, like going into that compound.
Yeah, but we
right?
didn't covertly
And-
invade
or-
Iraq.
or-
Iraq was an
right,
open
exactly. That's what I'm
operation.
saying. They're sort of comparing apples and oranges to a certain degree. When we're debating whether we're going to go
Shouldn't
to war, I
Shouldn't
think we
Bush
can
have been
expect our
open
government-
about what we knew?
He should have been honest about what
Okay.
we knew and what
Okay.
we didn't know.
And I think we should be open and honest
Yeah.
about the man is dead. He's totally dead. The pictures won't make him any less dead. Releasing the pictures is not a threat to any ongoing military operation.
Yeah.
Just release them.
I just want to make a tiny little
Default
argument
on the
with you trying
side
to
of-
take Bush's action, which was actually to lie.
No, I'm not
Lie to-
equating
and
them.
then-
I'm just making the
okay,
point that
yeah.
you were very critical of one, and you seem very accepting of the other.
I'm not accepting. I'm just saying that it is a fact that when you have a government that engages in military and sometimes very touchy diplomatic actions, there are things that will be kept secret as a part of that, and you can't have it both ways. So, and we can expect a process by which there's decisions made about which things are kept secret, and we can expect that they're honest about the things that they tell us.
But
and
where
that
is
ultimately
the
those things
secrecy?
become part
They've
of-
talked ad nauseum
Yeah.
about this mission and his death, and
Mm-hmm.
and that they have the proof. I mean, saying over and over you have the
Yeah.
proof without showing the proof is just weird. It's unnatural. Normally, part of crowing about the proof you have is displaying the proof you have.
I think that there is reasons because of the way this war has been, because of the way this war has been fought. And again, I'm not saying that this should be the final decision, but I think it's fair in the decision-making process to worry about what crowing means in that context.
But you're agreeing
and so to use that word, that's exactly what I'm talking about. To treat it like a trophy in some way, I think could be. It's fair to wonder if that's unnecessarily inflammatory. So again, I'm not arguing for the outcome. I'm just saying that's a legitimate part of the discussion.
But you agree that it should ultimately come out.
I ultimately think they should
Okay.
release them.
So in a way, we kind
Yeah.
of ultimately get to the same point. I'm just in more of a hurry than you are. Is
Maybe
that
so.
fair to say?
Maybe so.
I guess I just trust in the openness
Yeah.
approach, and I wish we had more of it. And I think we're badly served by giving people in government the benefit of the doubt. I'm a Thomas Paine kind of
Right, but
guy.
there's supposed
It's
to-
a necessary evil,
Right,
even
well,
at its
there's
best.
Committees. This goes through committees, and there is supposed to be a citizen oversight component to what becomes secret. So I do think, in this case, we're saying, okay, does one person get to decide this is secret, or
One
does it
person
go through
decided
this
in this case.
process? Right, but there is a process it could go through to decide whether or not it gets released. Are you comfortable that some things don't get released right away, or do you think everything should get released right away?
I think everything that's a done deal is up for our review, up for our eyes and ears. I think we can be trusted. They want us to be on the lookout. If you see something, say something. We're supposed to be enlisted in their cause. I don't feel very enlisted if even after you've done something, you don't trust me with the photograph of the guy's dead
So
body.
the sealing the Warren report, the Warren Commission, all the background on that for X number of years, you don't.
Well, look
think
what that
that-
accomplished.
Yeah.
Look where we are because of that.
Yeah.